Welcome to the Good Ride. Davey Boy here, and today we're going to be talking about the Garden Snowboards Ragamuff. I rode this with my Burton Ion boots and my Union Force bindings. I got it out in some deep powder. It was over a foot of snow, and I also got it out in some nice, crisp, clean groomers. For the sizing, I'm 6'3.5", 245 pounds. This board is a 165. And it fit me perfectly. I have a size 12 boot. This board was wide enough where I had no toe or heel drag, but it also wasn't too wide where it felt clunky like some older, more classic wide boards. For the swipe rights and the swipe lefts, what I like and don't like, my swipe rights board is built for bigger riders. Good pop, playful flex, pretty solid setback for a free ride board. Easy to control board for full camber, and it's pretty easy turning for its width. Swipe lefts, it only comes in one size. Even though it has a pretty solid setback on stance, it doesn't float quite as well as you would hope for. The shape is tapered and directional. There's actually a good bit of taper here at 17 millimeters, even though it didn't feel as set back or as tapered as you would think it would when it was on snow. I thought it felt pretty centered underfoot. When it comes to the camber profile, this is full on camber from tip to tail. You can see where the camber point starts in the tail, and you can see how this bows all the way across into one nice bow that ends right up here where the nose starts. And for our viewers, I had another garden board, the Kazakh, in a 166, so we'll throw that on the table real quick to show you that camber profile. And voila, they look like the same board, but the bottom graphic is a little different. This is the Kazakh in a 166. And you can see this one has a touch of early rise. The camber starts a little farther up in the tail and it ends a little earlier in the nose. Then voila, the Ragamuff is back. The on-snow feel of this board is locked in, but it's not too stiff, so it allows you to turn it around and play around with it a little bit without feeling overly aggressive like some other bigger camber boards of this size would. I would say this board is for advanced to expert riders. Probably not the easiest board for someone who's on the lower level of intermediate or somebody who's gonna skid a lot of turns. And for edge hold, this board is right on par with most other higher quality boards in the same category. And I don't think they're doing anything really special with this side cut. There's no disrupted edge or anything, but I didn't have a problem with it being too grippy on the groomers or being too washy or anything like that. So I would say on par with most competitors. So when it comes to the flex personality, we got the Ragamuff 165 here. This board has a good give to it. It definitely isn't too stiff, but it has a good amount of stiffness. It's right about where it needs to be to handle bigger riders like this board is designed for, without being too stiff. You see that spring out of the flex. See the nose? It's a little more givey in the nose. And then for the tail down here, ooh, that's a stiff tail. When it comes to how this board held up in uneven snow, I thought it did a good job. I think this board has a good combination of a more playful flex while also staying damp enough for a heavier rider to charge over some micro bumpy snow, tracked out powder, smaller moguls, things like that. This board did a good job of absorbing the chatter while still having a lively personality to it. When it comes to speed and base glide, I personally like a black base. I think they're the fastest bases out there. As you can see, this base has a beautiful graphic on the bottom. And if you get a PTEX gun with clear PTEX, you can do repairs on this without the funky black flakes that'll drop off. This board is not slow by any means. I would say it's middle of the pack when it comes to its competitors. It's not going to blow your socks off or win any races, but I wouldn't say it's going to make you lose any races either. When it comes to straight lining, this board is a little bit more on the turny side, but you can straight line on it, no problem. When it comes to turning and carving, I thought this board jammed on the groomers. The full camber across this thing definitely plays into how well it turns on hardpack. I didn't think it was catchy. I thought it was comfortable. I thought it had a nice bow out the tail. You can lay on your edge and really feel it flexed and boost you out of a turn. Overall, I like the turning experience on this. When it comes to powder, I'm gonna do a little powder stance reach around for you. If you set this board all the way back at a 22.5 inch stance width, you will get negative 6.25 setback on board, which is really solid, but the full bow of camber actually plays into this, and it doesn't get as good a float as you would expect for that much setback on board. I found this board to be a little bit of a back leg burner, especially once we got into the 10-inch foot and a half territory. And take that with a grain of salt. That's Mountain Bachelor, where it's a little flatter than most resorts, and we need that extra early rise, that extra rocker boost to float through some flatter spots. So if you're riding steeper terrain, this board should be good for you. And there's a good little bit of tail there, so if you're getting airs and powder, you have a good landing gear. When it comes to riding switch, I'm not the best switch rider, but this board will do about as good as any other tapered directional board will with full camber. When it comes to the park, this board is poppy. I had a really good time riding around and popping on it. I think I liked the Kazakh a little bit more for jumping off of stuff, but this board wasn't bad. It had a nice poppy, playful flex to it, and I wish I could have gone through more park features, but unfortunately the tide is low on Mount Bachelor right now, and we do not have any real park features set up at the moment, any bigger jumps. So take that with a grain of salt, but I like this board. I think it'll do great if you're taking big jumps in powder or anything like that, especially if you like a little more centered stance for a powder board. And the pipe, I think this board would do good. It's probably not your best pipe board, but it definitely should be solid for a tapered directional board because of that full camber. And overall, I'm thoroughly impressed by Garden. I don't think I've seen many first run snowboard companies have as high of a quality product. I think this board is definitely worth its price tag, right around $500. You know, I got on this board expecting to kind of compare it to the Libtech Skunk Ape, another classic big guy board that I've ridden in the past. And if I was doing apples to apples, this board rides kind of how I hoped the Skunk Ape would. For my personality, this board's a little easier to control, a nice playful personality, and I think a lot of bigger boards that are designed for bigger riders end up being kind of extra stiff and a little more aggressive. This board is easy to handle and comfortable, and I think it's a really good option for a lot of bigger guys, especially people that aren't looking for something that's going to ride them all around the mountain. You know, they want to feel like they're in control and they're having a fun day, and you can turn it on when you want to and ride as aggressive as you possibly can. But also, if your legs are tired or you're riding around with the kids on the weekend or just with your friends and you want to cruise a little slower, this board's absolutely capable of doing that as well. So I think it's a very well-rounded big guys board. And if you're looking for something that's tapered directional and you're not a big fan of hybrid rockers, it's a good option.